Abarera Legos Ram Ori Banish C10 Demonio Dinaja 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 Abarera Legos Ram Ori Banish C10 Abarera Legos Ram Ori Banish C10 Demonio Dinaja 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 Abarera Legos Ram Ori Banish C10 Demonio
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Apocrypha. I am Atius Dade. Over here next to me, this beautiful human being, that is Mystic Salon. Right below me is my lovely partner, Black Witch Dyra, and our guest today. Dude, all right, you can stab me for this later. How the fuck do you pronounce your name, man?
How would you pronounce it if you're giving it a shot?
Honestly, the first time I tried to pronounce it, it came out Shea.
That's okay. I'd probably say Shay if it wasn't my name. It's Shea Bile.
Okay, all right, there we go. All right, I should have asked you that before we went live, but you know.
Sure. Okay. I get it.
It's like, fuck it, whatever.
Yeah.
So yes, so we have our guest Shay with us. I'm very excited to kind of jump into this now. Before we jump into it, we have a routine that we do at the beginning of the show where Mystic does a weekly tarot reading based on the energy and vibe of everything. So, Mystic, what big decks do you have for us today?
So this is a new one, but can I just point out one other thing? I want to ask how many times you mispronounced Diver's name before you got that right. Just saying. Just
I
for the
actually don't
record.
think I got it wrong.
You did like 3 times in a row, even after she corrected you. I can go back to the video and show
Really?
you if
Okay.
you want.
Oops. All right. My bad.
I'm just
As
picking
long
on you,
as no one gets Nietzsche's name wrong and say
right?
Nietzsche or Nietzsche.
There you go.
Nietzsche. Okay.
So today I have Gothic literature tarot.
Okay.
So this is a neat one. It's one of the newer ones that I got off of a Kickstarter a while back. It's based off characters actually in Gothic literature, as it states. So it's silver foiled, pretty neat. Cardstock is kind of, I don't know, kind of cheap feeling, but easy to shuffle. You know me, I hate my borders. I like to point that out all the time because Scarlett always, as soon as I say that, goes through the whole run. Like, why do you think you hate borders? That means something. The borders aren't there because you don't like to go outside of the lines. So she'll always read me on that. So we're going to do a couple of cards. We're going to do 3. And then we'll look at a couple of other ones if you want. That's interesting. There are no major arcana cards. So our first card here is the 4 of Ravens. So if you get a good look, everything in this deck is based off of some type of Gothic style literature. The major arcana cards, I'll show you a couple in a minute because those actually have some of the specific characters in it, which are pretty cool. Some, if I'm like Wuthering Heights and a couple of other ones I saw in there. So we'll get to that. So 4 of Ravens. In this particular deck, Ravens are swords, representing that air part, which makes sense, right? You've got a bird, pretty easy. 4 of Swords has actually come up for us a few times in the last couple of weeks, and it is all about, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say banishment, but like putting back things that aren't supposed to be there and putting a block up in something that is supposed to be there. So the energy right now is that there is something that we need to expel from around us, or from what's going on, from our energy, from our lives. So focusing on those things, things do get better when you do that, but you have to kind of push that out and put it away. So 4 of Ravens, or 4 of Swords, like I said, is all about this. I don't want to say. I'm feeling barriers is probably a better way to express it, is making sure that you put up your barriers so that things don't get too shitty so that they can improve. We then have the 10 of Torches. That's an easier one, right? Torches. This would be your wands in this particular deck. I don't know if it's focusing here. There we go. Try not to get it. And they're matte, by the way, which I really like. That's one of my favorites. So the 10 of Torches, for me, this is another opportunity for us to change kind of the way that we're thinking about things. There may be a potential for some selfishness going on in the energy in the room. So that's taking, again, a look at what's going on around us and really working towards finding what it is we need to do to go to the next level. You can kind of see them going up the stairs here. It's like getting out to that next place. For me, when I do tarot and I'm reading from the 0 to 10, you think of it just like a cycle, like any other, right? The 10 is kind of the end, but it also means the next one's coming. So when you look at it from that perspective, this is like, we're probably not getting what we actually want out of what we're doing. So take a look at your situation and what's going on really right now, and make sure that you're not the one that's being a little overzealous and kind of pushing everybody else out of the way when you need to reiterate what you're doing and rework on what you're doing. That's the 10 of Torches.
Is Torches wand? Does it translate to wands?
Wands, yeah.
And is Ravens swords?
Ravens is swords, yeah.
Okay.
And then we got one of each, actually, and I shuffled these pretty good. The last one is Skulls, which is for pentacles in this particular case. This would be like your coins.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. I love the imagery in these too. Like, I haven't actually been through every one of them, but I love to. I'm going to show a few of the major arcanas because they're pretty nice. So the Seven of Skulls. So this again is your pentacles. When I'm in the areas of the sevens, like that end of the middle section, it's a hard point to be in because it's a transition, but it's also like, we need to really pay attention and focus on what we're doing, but not hesitate in what we're doing it. So the seven is a reminder of the hard work that you've done. You have to keep moving forward. You can't second guess yourself at this point, or you're going to end up not meeting whatever it is we're trying to go through. So the energy this week, honestly, is a little bit more negative than it has been in the past. It's really about us trying to find out why we're working outside of our barriers for some reason, why we're maybe being a little bit selfish or not really doing what we would normally do to make things work, and trying to figure a way around that. And we can do that by, trusting your instincts, trusting what you want to choose to do, trusting what you've decided to do and not hesitating, which you can also do without ego, by the way. It doesn't mean just, run full force into it, but energy this week and that just in general without the tarot cards have been a little bit not exciting, I should say. But let me pull out a couple of these so you can see some of the major arcana. The World, for example. Where's my camera? And I don't know all the characters in here. Catherine Earnshaw, that's a character in a book somewhere. I can look them up. But what's another good one? Oh, Count Dracula, right? As the devil.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I'd like to see. I need to look at who did the artistry on these, because pretty neat. Where is another?
Yeah, it kind of has like a charcoal abstract type, a charcoal brush abstract type vibe.
Anybody know who Judge Pincian is?
No idea.
I'm gonna have to look it up in a minute. But oh, here's one that everybody will know: the Hanged Man, and it makes sense too. Quasimodo.
Do like the artwork
So,
though.
There's actually a lot more color in it for some reason that's not like transitioning through my camera because my camera sucks. But it is a really neat deck. There's one some people may know, Faustus, the Magician. There's actually a lot more color in it, like in that the faded grays are colored. It just is not picking up. So, but anyway, that's the energy for the week. A little bit more needing to look at ourselves and find out why we're actually causing all the problems. A little bit of self-reflection needed, I think, to get to whatever we're trying to do. Merry Christmas.
Well, says you. I don't cause any issues.
Those cards are your cards, like definitely. I'm just kidding.
I guess so sometimes, maybe. All right, so let's jump into this. So, Shay, so the reason I asked you to come on is on my TikTok, you just kind of popped up on my FYP.
Nice.
So you're having a conversation.
Glad the algorithm is working against its instincts.
Right. No, like, I mean, you're having a conversation.
Stop using hashtags. I stopped using hashtags because I felt like they might be filtering out words like Satanism and Luciferianism. So I'm glad it reached you.
Hey, so am I. And I'm also glad you answered me so quickly. So, I mean, this whole thing was like super like last minute. So, like, so he's got something going on November 7th. He'll talk about that in a minute. He's like, yeah, can we do it before that? So that way I can talk about that. I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I mean, we could do it this weekend if you're up for it, dude. Like, it's kind of last minute, but fuck it,
Yeah.
So yeah, but you're having this conversation with this, young lady. I don't know who that is. She seems to be in several of your videos.
Luzielo is a longtime friend and I guess you could say ritual partner. We kind of have for the last 10 years really explored our faith, and that's kind of the relationship. It's like a church. It's like my it's like my church friend. What traditional people say, my friend at church. That's the relationship we have.
Okay. But anyway, so I kind of watched the video, and the way that you guys kind of described and talked about the left-hand path, really kind of grabbed me, and I found it very interesting. So I think kind of like let's start there. Like I'm very curious. I want to hear more about like kind of like what brought you to the left-hand path, and what's like how do you view it? Like what's your view of the left-hand path?
Sure. Well, I appreciate you bringing me on. I appreciate you providing a platform to have the conversation, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you. So thank you. What brought me to the left-hand path came from a place, as I feel many come into the occult of a need, out of necessity, arguably desperation. I grew up in one of the more seedy areas of Los Angeles in the 90s. It got pretty bad. There's a lot of rap songs that talk about that legacy. And I was right there I grew up in Linwood, which is right next to Compton, kind of same difference, Southgate, Compton, that whole area. And it sucked, and I was picked on immensely, and it was just a radical socioeconomic impoverished area, and that was more for most of my childhood to my teens, and I was not getting any answers I wasn't being protected at home. I wasn't being protected outside the home, and I noticed a lot of my abusers, a lot of the people identified as being Christian. God seemed to be on their side a lot of the time. And I just was desperate to make a change in my environment and have power over it. I felt incredibly powerlessness, and I felt kind of cornered. And the occult offered it. I remember I was probably 11. I went to a used bookstore called Acres of Books. That's not there anymore. It used to be one of the biggest used bookstores in the country, and they're in Long Beach. And I ended up wandering into the psychic phenomena metaphysical section, and I came upon Dion Fortune's Psychic Self-Defense, and it was written in the 20s, 30s, and the language in there was radical. It was talking about people levitating and astral projecting and fighting elementals, air elementals, and astral vampires, and souls having weight, and all her famous fight with a werewolf that she sucked into her solar plexus. Like, it was just radical wizardry from the Theosophists at the time, and that really inspired me and realized, okay, this stuff, if there's something to this, I might be able to make a change in my situation finally. I might be able to get a handle on these things. I might be able to turn the cards my way. And so I started practicing magic and witchcraft, and Satanism came soon after. And of course, the Satanic Bible, as many people who grew up in that time were exposed to. Their first exposure was pre-internet, was to Anton LaVey and the Satanic Bible, and I read it in one sitting, and it resonated with me. I'm not a LaVeyan Satanist today, neither by ideology or even my spirituality. However, I have respect for that path because it taught me for the first time that I can not feel ashamed of who I am, that I could be proud of who I am, that I can be autonomous, that I don't have to succumb to the judgments of others, that I don't have to believe in them. And even if there's no one else there for me, and sometimes it felt there was no one there for me, I could be there for myself, and I could be present for myself, to the point even of saying, you are your own God, and your birthday is the highest holiday. These are things I needed to hear as a child, desperately. It was the first time I found a way to kind of love myself and not feel a victim and not feel ugly and not feel the way that I was made to feel. And then things started to change. People hated me more, admittedly, because I really came out with it. I really embraced it. Now it wasn't just people picking on me, but it was school authorities. I remember at 13, after the Columbine shootings, me and my friend at the time got pulled in. We got searched down. We got put into detention because people had reported that we might shoot up the school. So now, but for the first time, I had control over my environment. I had control over the narrative for the first time in my life. And since then, Satanism has served to be a foundation through all of my life to this point, so much so that I have pledged my life to speaking and exploring the history, legacy, and really the all the possibilities that come with the satanic religion and left-hand path religion, and demanding, if nothing else, a seat at the table. Even if I'm disagreed with, my voice will be heard. And that's what I've committed my life to. And as long as I know, the rest of my life, until my last breath, is fighting for that voice that I didn't have, and that a lot of others didn't have and continue not to have. And that's been my life's charge. So that's what brings me here today.
Rock on, man. So, based off of what you're saying, you are a theistic Satanist then?
Yeah, the atheistic to theistic Satanist binary that I see in Satanism over the last 5 to 10 years, I don't feel like it's necessarily helpful. I
agree.
don't. Satan as a symbolic artifice is just as powerful as Satan as a visceral, objective, subjective artifice. So I think in the end, and I think atheism and theism is too simple. There's all kinds of ways we can interpret a theist metaphysical or ontological status of there's pantheistic, there's panentheistic, there's henotheistic. There's all these ways you can imagine a god. And I think the theistic versus atheistic is a oversimplified way that I feel like our community has fallen into. But yes, I am a theistic Satanist.
I mean, I agree with you. The reason I ask is because the atheistic community, or the LaVeyan Satanists, are very vocal about
Sure.
the idea and concept that
Sure.
theistic Satanism does not exist.
Right. Yes, they call them reverse Christians, is what Peter Gilmore will say, and whoever runs their X account. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: LaVey wasn't a terribly good LaVeyan Satanist, which is why I still speak of his legacy earnestly, because LaVey was very much a believer, not just in sorcery and magic and the occult. LaVey, there's a lot of evidence to show that LaVey was much more of a believer in the satanic force than he was made out to. But he knew that coming out with, hey, we actually do believe in the guy, he knew that that wasn't going to be taken seriously in the milieu at the time. Just, there was all these New Age religious movements coming out at the time, and LaVey knew the power of marketing, and he knew that he had to set himself out as being the rational one, the rational cults. And that's why there was such an emphasis put on. But if you look at the church's members from 66 to the early 70s, mid 70s, there was a mix. There was theistic Satanists, there was atheistic Satanists, there was everything in between, and they were all accepted into the church.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I mean, I was just kind of curious, like,
Yeah.
where you kind of stood with that. So, now the left-hand path. So, in a lot of the videos that I was watching of yours, you speak about the left-hand path as if it's inherently spiritual, or it's kind of like it has its inherent theistic nature to it, which I think is probably like the one thing. I mean, and if I'm misinterpreting your
Sure.
your angle on this, then I apologize. But it's the one thing that I kind of disagree with, is I look at the left hand path as kind of like an overlay. Like all the way down to I could say that with the right mindset, a Christian could be left hand path. I look at it more as a philosophical overlay. It kind of goes on top of kind of like what we work inside of spiritually. So I'm curious, like,
Yeah.
where you stand with that.
Yeah, there's a couple things there I think are interesting, especially the last one. The last part of what you said, I think, is very interesting. Although I seem to discuss spirituality a lot in any of my podcasts or videos that I do, or in discussion, I think I've actually, it's interesting, I've often been accused of sounding atheistic, which is because my recent book, Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left Hand Path, I approach it from a scholarly way, and though the beliefs of Nietzsche and how they overlap with LaVey's is an anti-theistic one. So I speak honestly about it. So people read the book and go, and a lot of them go, I don't understand. Shay seems spiritual, but he wrote almost like the book
Hmm.
covers a very anti-theistic. But that's just because I'm speaking honestly about those writers, those thinkers. Um, the I often talk about in my lectures some of the early characters who adopted these phrasings, and it was actually you see both. You see those who came from an ideological and philosophical bent, like some characters that I mentioned, and there's some figures that speak from a purely spiritual. So if you look at like Blavatsky, incredibly spiritual or theistic in her conception of Baphomet or Satan. If you look at Stanislaw Szyszewski, the Polish decadent, who was the first to identify as a Satanist in the written record, he was incredibly anti-theistic. He was a Nietzschean. He was a self-identified Nietzschean, a Nietzschean disciple. So surely the left-hand path has an ideological and philosophical bent. So I don't think we actually disagree there. I agree with you that it can be simply ideological, in addition to being a spiritual path. I think these are both possible. The part about Christianity being left-hand path, very interesting, very interesting, and I think so. But we have to, and I actually agree with you there, but with an asterisk, and that is that how are we thinking of the left-hand path? If we're thinking of the left-hand path in a traditional sense, we're meaning a deviation, an individuation from the divine. So, like one's apotheosis, becoming a god. If we're thinking of the right-hand path in this way, then it's a merging of the god, or kind of a supplication. That's not the whole left-hand path. That's one aspect of it. Left-hand path, then also people think of moralistic. Well, left-hand path means you could do curses, right? And you're okay with that. So there's a moralistic attribution to the left-hand path, which is actually not right either, because there's right-hand path people that do curses all the time. If you look in hoodoo and you look at some Christian sects, they're lighting candles to do curses on people. So purely, so clearly you're seeing curses and malevolent and baneful magic coming out of the right hand path as well. And you see left hand path people that engage in supplication or prayer or genuflection, which is what I do. I see Satan as one to be revered spiritually. So neither of those necessarily fit. So the left hand path becomes not as clear of a term to define things, more as an umbrella, right? We know
Agreed.
Satanism, we can say that's left hand path. Luciferianism, we can say that's left hand path. Chaos magic, maybe left hand path. But is this act left hand path? Maybe. Is this way of worshiping left hand path? Maybe. It becomes less clear, I think.
Well, I think with the left-hand path, at least on my side of things, the way that I look at it is the left-hand path is classified, generally speaking, with two primary points, and that is self-deification and immortality. Now, I look at self-deification as the idea and understanding of having complete and utter control over your own actions and the direction that your life goes. It's not necessarily spiritual or believing in something beyond yourself. It is literally believing in the ability of oneself. Immortality falls into the premise of legacy, like having a focal point in the direction that you're moving in your life, that this is what I want my legacy to be, regardless of whether or not you truly have control over what your legacy is going to be, to have that overarching kind of direction that you want to go that way with it. And kind of having every action in your life line up with that immortality that you want to have. I think that when we deal with organizations like Become a Living God, things like that, EA Coeting, stuff like that, they take it they just take it too far in this concept and this idea of people becoming literal gods. The way that I view things is that if you truly believe that you can become a living God, there's probably medication that you need to be taking. Like that's just my outlook on it. Like
Sure. I get what you're saying. You also have to understand that there's a marketing element to a lot of what EA Coeting and Become a Living God have done.
Of course.
And arguably successfully. So there's a bit of hyperbole in a lot of their language. But having said that, And it almost becomes like sometimes in the heat of it, it almost becomes like a caricature of the idea of apotheosis. But again, you see this going back, this idea that in the midst of the death of God, who is going to become our redeemer? Who is going to become our anointed one? And this humanistic idea that then the self, let's celebrate the self, the spiritual egoism. I think it's helpful. I think it's a beautiful concept. I think it's much needed as I kind of I think I demonstrated in where I come from and my early experience. I think it's needed for someone like me at that time, and I think it's needed for a lot of people to say, you know what, you are a god, so start acting like one. I also think it has its limitations. Over the years, I've also seen how the pressure to be a god, the pressure to apotheosis in the left-hand path, it doesn't leave room for vulnerability. There's days when you're not going to feel like a god that day. In fact, you're going to feel everything other than that.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I felt like wasn't always present in the left-hand path is an idea of uh, an understatement towards compassion and powerlessness. But I think, and I did a video about it, I've written about it, the Lucifer of Liège, that famous statue. I actually had that's in Belgium. I had a moment when I encountered that statue that I actually think it made me understand that Lucifer could very well be our Christ, in the sense that in the left hand path, someone that we can look to who's lost the fight, but that serves as a point of that things are going to get better and things are okay, and it's okay, you're not a god today, you're going to get up and fight again when you're ready. So we do have that in and I think in our community, but it's not as stated as it might be. The compassionate aspect is not as stated as you might see in some other paths, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely feel that vibe. I think it's always kind of like 110% all the fucking time, and like there's not kind of like not like a moment to kind of breathe, you know?
Sure.
So yeah, I can definitely feel that. So another thing I'm curious about, because you have a few clips up of kind of like your talks, right? And I was very intrigued by the breakdown of the history of Satan that you go through, right? Now, me being me, and Dyra is gonna get this question. The reason I'm asking this. So how far beyond the Abrahamic traditions have you gone with Satan?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I like that question. There's, if we look strictly linguistically, right, etymologically, where Satan comes from, it appears for the first time in Numbers 22, being assigned to, and we're looking about 400 BCE, being assigned to a supernatural being. It's an angel. I actually have a painting of it. I had custom made. It's an angel that appears before Balaam and stops him from going to Jerusalem. And that angel is a Satan. That is to say, it's an opposer. It's an obstructor. It's a physical, spiritual obstruction, or a stopping, or an opposition. It's the first time we see it used in the language. And then over the next 600 years, people negotiated. They negotiated the role of Satan, and he eventually would become the universal principle of evil, winning out over about a dozen different entities that are mentioned in the Old Testament and that are discussed at the time in various apocryphal texts and things like that. Now, that's if we talk about the birth of Satan, the word, and how it came to be. If we think of Satan then as if we think then as the devil, though, or a god that opposes, maybe a god of opposition, then we can look back to the Zoroastrians and with Angkor Manu against Ahura Mazda. That's the first time you see a duotheistic model of a god versus a holy aspect versus versus the opposite. Prior to that, things were more complicated. If you look at Greek mythology, it's not simple evil. All the gods are fucking evil or capable of it. Hecate, if I appeal to her, I sacrifice a dog and I throw it in a well and I appeal to her, then if my sacrifice was accepted, then Hecate allows my child to live past the age of 3. If she denies my sacrifice, then my child dies. The gods giveth and the gods taketh away. And you really see that model going as far back to the Mesopotamian origins. How far back do I go? I dig into Satan in as many forms as I can, but it starts, I personally centralize around Satan. The Lucifer, the fall, kind of the Gnostic conceptions, demiurge conceptions, all of it I think are open to me. The 19th century conceptions, the Romantic poets, the idea, the Promethean aspect of Lucifer, all of that are available to me. These days I've kind of more zeroed in on it. Over the years, Hecate has been in there, Santa Muerte has been in my pantheon. The only one that's really actively present besides Satan, Lucifer, and the demons that are within that, so the Solomonic demons, the Goetic demons, and different diamonds, as you could say, would be Nergal. It's because a very close friend of mine, there's a connection there, and so I have a dagger of Nergal on my wall that I pray to at least once a day. So, do I believe Nergal is satanic? I believe there's a satanic essence that can be drawn back to that time. You can look at the Ereshkigal, and you can look at Lilithu, and you can look at Lamia, and you can look at these, or Lamashtu, and you can look at these gods, and you can see something satanic in them. But to say that any of those are Satan is going to be a contentious statement. I think I view Satan in a pantheistic model as well as different types of models. I just say omnitheist. I believe in all the forms that he and it can exist. But I see that there's a part of Satan in all things, in all life, in all mythologies. But I wouldn't counteract the cultural importance of something that's Mesopotamian or Greek or Roman or Asiatic and say, well, that's satanic. So yes and no.
All right. I mean, that makes sense. The reason I ask is so I have a bit of an issue overall with just Abrahamic, the triptych of
Sure.
Abrahamic faith. And up until
Sure.
recently, I've allowed myself to stay, I suppose, somewhat ignorant to the readings of like the Qliphoth or Goetia, simply because of the level of Abrahamic influence that is intertwined with those types of texts. And the way that I look at things is when you look at, a threefold of spiritual belief that, in its heyday, its entire existence was built around the idea of destroying the occult, and kind of
Sure.
maintaining, their level of control over, other cultures, and then incorporating that into their imagery and into their belief systems and into their masses and things like that. I can't help but look at something like the Goetia or the Qliphoth or things of that nature and not say that this is either bullshit or very much watered down. There has to be some type of spin that's on this, and for a very specific reason, because if you look at the movements of the Catholic Church by itself, like over history, they don't make decisions just to make decisions. Every decision that the Catholic Church has ever made has been in the interest of the power of the church, the reach of the church, the control of the church. That's, the entire mentality that exists in church. So, and I say up until recently because Dyra has convinced me to begin reading it correctly, so yeah, I mean that's why I ask, because
Yeah.
I'm curious how far beyond Abrahamic traditions you went, because I was curious like what you found or haven't found.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah. I think that again, it's a fascinating question, and it's one that sparks actually a bigger phenomena, and that is so the first part of it, I understand the anathemic reaction to Yahwehist Abrahamic faith. It's been an incredibly the word colonialist is very charged politically, but I
yep.
really do mean that it was colonialist. It really did consume and convert all the lands that it touched on a global level. And a lot of it was a story of subjugation. A lot of it is a story of sinfulness, of ugliness, the hatred of man. The Virgin Mary. It's built into the symbols. It transcends language. You don't even have to say it. The Mary must have been a virgin because women are too dirty if they were to have sex to have given birth to God, right? It's fucking Eve is the one that gets tempted. Eve is the one that sins us. She's made from a rib. So there's a lot of really disgusting anti-human and nihilistic messages within Christianity, as Nietzsche famously identified, right? And others. So I 100% agree with you. I, however, at the same time, I think Satan has represented an opposition within that framework and a bucking back against that framework for a very long time. As soon as there was a god to worship, there were people who would worship his enemy. And I think it's become a source and an inspiration for opposition, for protest, for literature, for ideas to strike at the infrastructure and the architecture and the institutions at play, especially following the Renaissance and the French Revolution. Satan then becomes a god of the working man, a god of the underdog, a god of the criminals as well. Some of the earliest devil worshippers were criminals, just like Santa Muerte is for some of the cartels. And it's for the people on the sidelines. It's the people that's pushed out. It's for the ugly people. It's for the rejects. It's for the poor and the unpopular. So Satan was a voice of these disenfranchised. And I think there's power in that. But also, the horned god, Cernunnos, Pan, these got adopted into the framework that would define the horned devil. And there's pagan aspects, traditional witchcraft, the witch's Sabbath. So there's a lot there in Satanism. As my friend Lucia says, within the left-hand path contains the light and the dark and everything we need. There is every part of the human experience within it. Now, there's another part to what you said that I think is incredibly important. As I grew up, there was a lot of Satanists I knew, and the studies have bore out. There was a Satan survey that was done. I forget the sociologist's name, but rest in peace. He died a few years ago. He did what was called a Satan survey, and he kind of tracked Satanists, a few hundred Satanists, he did 3 surveys over the course of like 10, 15 years. And what you found is, and in my own anecdotal experiences, you find conversions into something like Ausatru. You'll say, well, the Nordic gods are more pure because Satanism was lacking or Satanism was empty. It didn't have enough for me, and I didn't care for the Abrahamic framework. And then some would go to Buddhism and things like that. And a lot of people around me I saw would say Satanism just didn't answer it for me. It wasn't enough. It wasn't spiritual enough. It seemed very limiting. And I get it if you stick to like the Satanic Bible and literally nothing else. A lot of literature has come out in the last 20 years, and especially literature has opened up that is over 100 years old for us to grasp onto, that answers a more robust spirituality, something that can actually guide our lives, something that can guide us and give us discipline, something that we can actually look to as a legacy and a history. And it's both theistic and atheistic and everything in between. So Satanism has always been more to me. it's not just simply an Abrahamic framework, it's the world. And it involves and it touches almost every culture in the world throughout history. And that's why I still proudly, and sometimes to my own detriment, still carry Satanist and don't step away from that. I completely understand
Yeah.
your opposition to an Abrahamic framework. I fucking get it. Like,
But it's not.
Yeah.
It's not the framework necessarily that I have opposition to, because I think that a lot of what we do ritualistically in our belief systems, a lot of the demons that we work with, I believe that they've existed beyond or what we call them today. You know, I don't believe that they just kind of cropped up out of fucking nowhere, church or whatever, you know, slapped a few names on them and then go. No, I believe that they've always been there. It's just coming, you know, when it comes to names, I look at names like I use this reference a lot on the show. Like it's like calling a phone number. You know, like you can have multiple phone numbers, it still reaches the same person. So you using
that's
a
a good
name,
analogy. I actually like that. I like that analogy.
you know, so it's like
Oh,
perfect example. I got two phone numbers. I got a U.S. phone number and I got a Mexican phone number because I live in Mexico, right? You call either one of those numbers a different number, but you're still getting the same person.
sure. Sure. Yeah, and that's actually most reflected in I think that's more clearly reflected in the Goetia or the Goetia, some say. You see like Astaroth, which we understand to probably come from Astarte, which we understand to probably come from Ishtar, which we understand to probably be related to Inanna. So you see what was once a goddess of fertility, war, sex, and everything in between is then some like multi-limbed demonic creature. And I understand the reaction to go, this is some bullshit. You took this image, this pagan image, you've completely kind of raped it and created this other thing to represent this demon. And I understand that perspective and that interpretation, and it makes sense. And I think it's something we should acknowledge that part of the demonization came about as inverting and desecrating pagan gods. The name Beelzebub actually used to be Baal, so like the son of Baal, Beelzebub. So Beelzebub was even that name was used to invert something that was once holy. It was used as a slander, as a slur, as a religious slur. So, and the Goetia is filled with it, but not always. There's also other things in there that are actually, if you read most of them, you know, like Andreophos will be this peacock spirit, and it says offers measuration or teaches you geometry and the history. Like, what? You might need that for like your studies or something. Like, this is not an evil, destructive being. And then you'll see a dog that has wings that then is like kills all enemies, but it's like it's a cool looking dog, right? Um, or murders, slays enemies and murders all or something. So there it is. But what I view when it comes to demonolatry is that these demons then become a new story. It carries that story. So they are influenced by these previous cultures, these previous pantheons, but then they become something else. And they assert something else, and they tell a new story. And it's not necessarily one to be avoided. I think it tells us a story about us and about what it means to be human. A good example is the demon Abazuth, which I've been writing about because she's going into my next book. And this is like a Lilithian character who strangles children, kills children. That's essentially what she does.
Good
She
times.
first appears, yeah, right. She first appears in the Testament of Solomon, dated around 200 CE, and she appears in this black kind of shade, and that's all she says she does. I murder children. I strangle them to death. She's the goddess of crib death. And it was a phenomena at the time. In fact, even though the church told people not to hold talismans to protect mothers, they still did it anyway. There was more prayers to fight against Abazuth in the Byzantine era and there was prayers to God to protect the child, technically, she became more popular than God, at least when it came to childbirth. And it's fascinating to me. And really, Abazuth is really it's a kind of Lilithu existed before that, but it is kind of can be considered a demonization of women. However, this tells us a story about something that's very central to the human experience: childbirth, losing a child. What does the family mean? What is the role? What has been the perception of women during this time, and what does it all mean? And I think these can be rehabilitated and recaptured, so that Abazuth, and just like Lilith has been, can be then seen as a point of the human experience, and what it means for health, what it means for fear, what it means for our greatest, what is holy, what is miraculous, what is sacred to us. That's what Abazuth teaches us. And I think there's power in those, just like there's power in all those demons. So although, yes, the Abrahamic colonialist project has demonized these different things, in that demonization has created symbols for us that we can use to empower ourselves.
Yeah,
In my mind.
one thing I find interesting, and like, I'm starting to feel like it's like almost like I'm calling you out, but I'm not. I swear I'm not. I'm not
No,
calling
so
you out. Instead,
your questions have been fantastic.
But so you talked about kind of like the semantics and kind of like how we use words and kind of like the origin of kind of like Satan, like when that kind of was first presented and things like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always found interesting about, like, looking at Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, Islam, things like that, when we talk about demons, or like what, the modern era, what a demon is where the word comes from, what the word actually means, demon.
Sure.
From its Greek origins, which essentially just means like a guiding spirit. That's it. And the whole concept of possession was, if Zeus found you kind of, worthy enough to have a guiding spirit from your birth, then you would be given Demon from the beginning of your life, rather than earning it by living your life. And I just find it funny how that word comes from, has transformed all of us, most of us, as today.
Sure.
Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's actually coming closer to what it used to be, actually, and I think in the demonology movement and in the left-hand path, we are bringing it back to more or less its original meaning. Now, there was a few meanings in Greek mythology or in Greek culture. There was the daimon, who was an intermediary. For the longest time, a daimon was an intermediary between. If you gave a petition to a god, the daimon would be the one that would carry it. It was the spirits of the air, as they say, spirits in between. There's also the Socratic daimon. So there's the daimon of Socrates that is a guiding ethic and is a voice that he hears. So like almost to its extreme end, we might say guardian angel. And then there's daimon to kind of represent a philosophical concept. The Greeks actually used daimon in all these ways, actually almost simultaneously. What happened is that a lot of things changed in the Hellenic era when Greek culture started to merge with Egypt, started to merge with the Near East, started to merge with, increasingly into indigenous Europe. The daimon, then it started to more focus on the daimon as that intermediary spirit, and there's a lot of like folk witchcraft where that it would utilize the daimon. So if you look in the PGM offers all these spells that interacts with a daimon, with a demon. And so then you can use a daimon to protect the household, you can use a daimon to carry out something that carry out your petition, and it became more personal and it took the gods out of it. So the daimon started to be a instrument or a channel for magic. Well, then a lot of those spells started to get darker. Well, I want this woman to love me. I don't care. I want to kill my competition. I want to put away this business. That is, I want, so on and so forth. And the diamond started becoming the one carrying those out. So although there was a universal meaning to the demon, it started to become known in the folk witchcraft scene as the demons were the ones carrying out these more nefarious spells, and that's what they became known for. And that's actually how the diamond became the demon, was because of occultists. It's because of us. We fucked it up 2,000 years ago. No, but if we look at what's happened now, demons are now being shown respect. People like myself, people like S. Connolly, people like Michael Ford, people like everyone, even Become a Living God, are starting to show that there's other ways to interpret these spirits and in more positive ways. We're undergoing a rehabilitation, a spiritual rehabilitation of demons. So we're getting a little bit closer back to what it was pre-Hellenic period.
All right. Now, before I go anywhere further, you know that the two of you can ask questions if you want to. Mystic, Gyra, like, you're here, right? Like, you feel free to interrupt.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a pretty active back and forth between you, so no, I think that something Shay just said about kind of like the rehabilitation of demons and how occultists have kind of 2,000 years ago we kind of fucked it up with what demons are and what they're about. Me being a bit of a Goetia nerd, I'm very much kind of looking into, because I'm writing a book about that, so I'm very much looking into stuff around the Testament of Solomon and things like that. And something that was said was by an angel was, do not let this knowledge fall into the hands of the wicked. And part of me kind of thinks that there's a new way that we can interpret that, rather than it just being a case of, oh no, because people are gonna, because demons are evil and we mustn't like let evil people use them. It's more so, don't let dickheads basically kind of taint what they're about, because they'll ask them to do things that are gonna kind of just completely change what they're about. So yeah, I don't know, that just made me look at that differently. And I also find that the ways in which, when it comes to the history of demons, you spoke about Astaroth, and Astaroth is one of the Goetic demons with quite a rich history. What I noticed though is that people kind of, I think they just, you could call it a misinterpretation, where they start to move Astaroth away from being demonic, because they're like, oh no, she's Ishtar, she's Inanna. It's just like, no, she's in, the way you're talking about her is in her Goetic form. It's like it's almost like they feel like being a demon is like a derogatory thing, and I'm like, I promise you they are fine with being a Goetic demon. Like, you don't have to like pussyfoot around it, like, oh no, you can't possibly be this horrible degraded thing, because you are this divine thing that you once were. And it's kind of like, it's such a complex thing in the ways that demons have been portrayed in history. And then you have like the Goetia. It's not a case of like, oh no, you're not this, you're that. It's the emanations. I feel like people are actually quite uncomfortable with the kind of demonic emanations. I think that they almost think that they're offensive, and I don't agree that they're offensive. I think that, you know, if you if you're doing goetic magic, you're not working with a nana, you're working with Astaroth. That's what yeah, that I can't get my head around when people start sort of like freaking out when I don't know, it's just something that I've witnessed personally.
Yeah, I think you said something really important there, and that is that the goetic representation is, and I agree with you, and that is that the goetic representation is its own, contains its own status, right? It exists independent um, of its predecessors, but carries a part of it in some way. But I like the way you put it, because the way you said it was they're perfectly fine being the goetic demon. I liked that, and that's not one we often hear. See, I think what you did there is that you said that that spirit is a part of it in some way, and they're still present, and it's not a refutation of the other ones. It's perfectly congruent. And that's a perspective that often doesn't come up, actually. And actually, this is a great conversation because often this aspect of it gets danced around quite a bit. The question of colonialism, the question of misogyny, of racism, of all the things that come with an imperialist empire and doctrine that is kind of transforming or being inspired by other cultures or dominating them some way. So the way you put it, actually, I think is the most positive reading and one that is the most affirming. And I like it quite a bit. So and I think that's a message that's going to serve demonolators a lot more, is to think that this is congruent with the past. It's a complete independent being than what it was before, and but also at the same time shares that essence as well. So
Yeah, and also on another note, what you mentioned about Lamashtu Lamia and all of that, I think that the ways in which that kind of, let's say, type of spirit, because it's essentially been called different things throughout different civilizations, is very kind of in alignment with basically what was going on at the time, which was like, you know, infant mortality rates. The survival rate of children was very low. So it's kind of like this idea that demons are what we kind of like mold our fears into, and that's what they have represented in history, essentially. What we're scared of, at least when it comes to the sort of like evil aspects of them. I think it's very much in alignment with just sort of worldly concerns at the time.
absolutely. Yeah. That's and that ties into, you know, what I Abazuth is one example that was the largest concern, the most compelling concern, especially when it came to siring children and bloodlines and family and so on and so forth. These had economic and socioeconomic impact. So it became one of the most pressing concerns. So of course Lilith or Abazuth, or Gaio is another name for it in the Greek. These meant the end of a family, the end of an heir, the end of it affected as high as the wealthy agents within culture. So absolutely, but then there's things for fevers. There was things for sicknesses that don't exactly mean life and death necessarily today in the Western world, but these were of prime concern. Things like starvation, things like poison, things like disease. These all had pressing needs, and I think the native spirits, the indigenous spirits, and the diamonds, the demonic spirits represented all of these together. So yeah, 100% agree.
I'll
One second. I just gotta address something in the chat. So Jeffrey, I've been sitting here for, I don't know, the last 45 minutes to an hour, I suppose, watching you completely attack everybody in the chat. Now, look.
Oh,
I've been
bring it up.
managing it.
Yep. What does he have to say?
So if you are someone that has found Jesus, you found God, and that is your calling, then you know what? God bless, brother. Like, all the power to you. But don't come into the chat attacking everyone or telling everyone that they're wrong or they're doing wrong or they're going to hell or this, that, and the next. You're allowed to be here. You can have a conversation. You can express your opinion. That is perfectly fine. Please refrain from attacking the other community members. Keep it civil, express your point, and wait for a reply. And if no one wants to reply, then please just stop spamming the chat and making people uncomfortable. Because instead of people in the chat being able to enjoy the conversation that is happening on the podcast, they're worried about what you're saying.
He just got a warning shot before you started talking, so
please keep that in mind. Like, if that is what completes you and makes you feel whole, then I am happy for you. I am proud of you for what you've accomplished in your life. But do not bring that to the table and attack others and try to make them feel like less.
And I'd also like to just add here, about a comment in the path to eternal life and love is both the left hand path and right hand path. The left hand is the Holy Spirit and the right hand is Jesus, masculine and feminine. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about, so
yeah, I mean, I could, yeah, I mean,
Sure. I mean, the left hand and the right hand path, you see it in Buddhism, you see it in Vedic religion. If a Christian wants to view this idea of the left and the right hand of God, sure. Doesn't necessarily, unless they're trying to like talk shit and say, well, what you're really thinking was Jesus Christ and God, you know, if they're going that angle.
He's not being as aggressive as some people that have come in here, but the thing is,
being very preachy.
Yeah, I've been watching it for like the last like half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that, and
Sure.
like it just kind of got to this kind of like tipping point where it's just like, all right, I'm just gonna have to say something.
Fair enough. Anything interesting?
Not really.
It's a very typical thing. That's why I've been a little bit quiet, not just because it's a little outside of my wheelhouse, but I've been following and responding in the chat quite a bit. So some really good conversation going on in there. So I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, that's great.
It's just when I notice that my community is focusing more on what one individual in the chat is saying and what's going on in the conversation in the podcast, that's when it becomes a problem. Right, and then that's what's happening. Like, people, there are constant replies to this person is like, have them just leave, stuff, and that's ruining the dynamic for everybody. So it's just like, yeah, I don't know. All right, moving on. All right, so Shay, what do you got going on, man? Like, so talk about this thing you got going on November 7th. Where is it? What is it? Like,
Sure. So, yeah, that is the kind of primary project that I have going on. Is for the last decade, I've been doing a lot of teaching, a lot of lecturing on this subject and related subjects in different places throughout the United States and throughout Europe. And I have paired with, I always had an idea that maybe this year I'll take a lot of the material I've done and put it in a way that people don't have to be in Berlin or England or St. Louis or Atlanta or New York or LA to be there, that I can make it available for an online audience, for a remote coursework. And so I paired up with Robin Artisan, who's a respected author on traditional witchcraft here in the States. And he has the Serpent Hall where he hosts his work, and he invited me to host my work there as a guest lecturer. So it's my first kind of online offering called The Fire and the Wine. It's 18 weeks. It's an 18-week course that covers the origins or history, the philosophy, and the ritual magic of the left-hand path, Satanism, Luciferianism, the left-hand path. So it goes into everything from the Vedic and Vamachara origins to the early iterations of principles of evil, spirits of evil, trickster spirits, and then into the origination of Satan, the devil, into the medieval and Renaissance, into the 19th century, and then finally into modern times. So all the different institutions and orders that exist today, and the various writers and thinkers. Then I go into kind of philosophy that discusses, again, some of the Vedic philosophy, some of the Neoplatonic philosophy, some of the concepts of what's called shunyata, so some Eastern ideas that come into play, and a lot of 19th century philosophy on nihilism, Nietzsche, the death of God, Schopenhauer, and finally the ideology that sprung up in the last 100 years with the Church of Satan, with Luciferianism, with the Einers, I can't even say their name, just the different groups that have come up with various ways to identify Satanism, Luciferianism, and what that ideology means. And then finally, ritual magic. I go into talking about all the different praxes, all the different practices, all the different modalities that is going as far back as I can into modern ways. So all the different ways that we practice magic with the left-hand path and what that means. Both the symbolism and the actual practice, demonology, and my own practice, which I've heavily documented over the last 10 years, and it's a very visceral and detailed presentation of that. So it's 18 weeks, weekly video instruction, pre-recorded video instruction, and then there will be every 6 weeks, there will be a live Q&A session, and we'll have a Discord channel for support and chat and things like that. So, plus materials. I try not to make it too heavy. Like, there will be, the videos will be digestible, something 15 to 30 minutes a week, plus you get a little bit of course material, something that people can do, follow along with without feeling like they're falling back. So, yeah, I'm excited for it. That begins November 7th. You can register up until November 14th. That's at serpenthall.com.
Rock on, man. That sounds
Yeah.
pretty interesting. Already got people in the chat asking about it, so there you go.
Yeah. serpenthall.com. You can register there. There's a single payment, or you can there's like several payments for those who want to kind of stretch it out, but to make it a little more accommodating. Yeah. Besides that, November 8th, I will be I still have a few more talks this year. November 8th, I'll be at Splendor Solis in Massachusetts. A lot of people have been saying, like, why don't you do something in New England? Why don't you do something in New England? I actually currently live here in New England, so it'll be fun. Splendor Solis is a great bookstore, so I'll be doing a talk there. November 17th, I'll be speaking at a venue in New York City. That will be on Stanislav Szybuszewski and Hans-Heinz Evers, and these are two very interesting characters from the theme of this event that's happening in New York City is very, very obscure, but very exciting kind of information, and that's what the speakers really bring to the table. So that's what I'll be speaking on there, and I'll be free of talks for the year from there.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good. Then I'll probably have to try to get you back on here after that.
Yeah, I think I'm currently. I signed with Theon for my next book, which will be called Hymns of the Red Dragon. It's going to be a demonic hymnal. So a lot of the things I mentioned today are going to play into a book of demonic hymns. But there's going to be scholarly information about each of these spirits in a way that's, I don't know if it's ever been really presented before in one place. So a lot of these things are just a few sentences to talk to you about a spirit. They control 300 legions, and they look like this, and that's about it. Well, it's looking into where these spirits came from, what they represent, what do the animal parts of them represent. So a scholarly introduction to them and as many sources as I can pull from, and then a hymn to that particular spirit so that they can be revered in a religious way. There's a lot of talk in the world of magic, not just the left-hand path, about working with. I'm working with, and that's fine. It's okay. But I feel like we've overemphasized this idea that I'm working with the spirit, like they're a coworker in the office. Like, I like to remind us to come back to treating something with religious deference. I say I paid devotion to. I didn't work with Santa Muerte. I paid devotion to Santa Muerte. I don't work with Satan. I pay devotion to Satan. I think that's what this demonic hymnal is going to bring back, is this, or at least contribute to the conversation, is bringing a sense of deference and worship to the demons.
But I think that that's like a big problem overall, like especially like I think kind of like in demonology, is like this idea that we control these things.
Yeah, like go fetch.
Yeah,
like
right.
go fetch.
Like, and it's like, you can't talk about this thing in one sentence and say that, you know, it has this power and it has this ability, but like then in the next sentence talk about it like it's fucking brain dead, you know. And it requires your fucking direction to do something, you know. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. It's like you do have like a level of reverence that you have to go through, and like, you know, dedication.
It's like a buddy. It's like a buddy. I tell people this in a simple way. It's like if I showed up, we showed up at dinner, and like we have dinner a few times, we have some conversations, we have some drinks, we kind of figure some things out about each other, we build a relationship of respect. At least give them the respect you would give to a kind stranger. At least. Don't, you know, think of giving offerings, think of breaking bread in some way. Hey, let me, you know, we just met, let me get you a drink, let me, you know, build a relationship with these spirits before you start demanding them to like help you get a promotion and stuff like that. Because it's rude. If I just met you randomly on the street and then said, hey, I'm not doing too hot, could you like get my ex to stop contacting me? It's random, and it's not, you're probably not going to get as warm of a response from that request, right?
Well, I mean, the thing is like, I mean, I consider myself kind of like a dedicant at Baphomet, you know, like that's the entity that I work with. There you go. There's that phrase, right? Work with. And
yeah, right. We're conditioned to say that.
Yeah, right.
It's just
right,
easy
right,
to say that. Yeah.
But to be honest, like the amount of times that, you know, I've been told no, you know, at like kind of presenting with something like, hey, I want to know about this. Like, so I work with gnosis, right? I don't ask for shit. Like that's kind of like my thing. Like I want to learn. I don't want the things that, you know, I'm calling to do something for me. Because I think
higher magic.
I think that that's, for me, this is just me, I feel that it is contrary to the whole concept of the left-hand path. Like for me, because the left-hand path, what are we learning? That we have the power, self-deification. We have the ability to move through this life and do shit ourselves, right? You have everything you need already exists in front of you. You just need to open your fucking eyes and find it, right? And then move in that direction, right? You don't need something to fucking smack you in the back of the fucking head and move you that way, or kind of force somebody to do something for you. You have the ability to do it. If you're asking something else to do it, then it for me, it's contrary to left-hand path, because you're not doing it. You're asking something else to do it. Now, guidance, that's one thing, right? Information, that's one thing. But to actually force something to happen, like, I no. So the way that I work in my practice is I focus on knowledge. One of the reasons why I've never like cracked open the Goetia until recently is not because I don't believe that these things exist. Of course I do. But I want to know what they're about from them. I don't want a book to tell me some other person's account of what these things are, to tell me I want them to tell me what they are. What are they capable of? What can they do? And I don't want to have this leaning into something that was already written. and
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
have it skew my interpretation of what's happening.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. I totally understand that. I think also I like to apply to my magical, if we're talking about magical practice, I like to apply a standard of evidence to it. I like to see repeated behavior. I like to be able to corroborate a particular event or experience I'm having so I can rule out mundane aspects to it. Um, you are right. I feel like the demons have been so limited in their description that a lot of people have been kind of forced to um, call from them. Not to say it's been out of necessity, but it's also been out of, I understand why one might want to do that, ask them directly. I think something like what I would like to do, and I think there's some others, um, and is to give a little bit more tools to the spirits to start with. Absolutely talk to the spirits, because no matter what, the spirit's going to have a particular relationship with you. Once they appear to you, they may be far more vicious than people have said they were, or they may be far more compassionate than people have said they were. I remember with Santa Muerte, I remember people would say, "Oh, Santa Muerte, I have the statue up there. I don't give offerings to it. It's up there in the corner, and it's fine." And that's their relationship with Santa Muerte. But when I was paying devotion to Santa Muerte, it was opposite. I would immediately feel there was I had two candles burning 24/7. I wouldn't let them do out. I did a Friday culto. I did daily prayers. The minute I stopped doing any of those, I felt a tension. I felt incredible stress. I felt anger, even resentment coming from her. That relationship quickly changed when I wasn't giving absolute adoration. That was the relationship for me, which is not the relationship for the person who has Santa Muerte on the top and she's infinitely compassionate. For me, she was severe and she was strict, because that's what our relationship was. So it's just like a human relationship. You may open up a certain part of yourselves to certain people, and then we do masking, we do coding, we do code switching in different parts of our life, at work or here or with other friends. I think we also implement this to understand that spirits may not follow a lot of what you have read about them. They may deliver something else, and to be open to that. But certainly both are valid, right? It gives you at least a framework. So if you understand the spirit looks like this, came from here, these are what it means linguistically or etymologically, that gives you a framework to start. It gives you a springboard to start something. A sandbox, right?
So I don't want to miss this opportunity, because if there's anybody that I know that isn't Mexican that does shit correctly when it comes to Santa Muerte, it's Daira. So, Daira, what is your experience compared to what he's talking about with Santa Muerte?
Probably a bit in between, in terms of like just having the statue there and, you know, having to make loads and loads of offerings. Probably a bit in between. I can't imagine just having a statue and not like putting anything else there. Like, that makes me quite uncomfortable. In terms of offerings, I usually kind of tailor them so that they kind of suit the aspect in which I'm working with at the time. There we go, working with. And yeah, and obviously there's also just like the usual offerings I give as well. There have been times where I felt her wrath, where I felt her anger, her resentment, and it is one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever felt in my practice. Really just like can't sit with it. Like, it has to be, there's this desperation to find a solution to it. I've definitely felt compassion from her, probably for the most part, but also when I've fucked up, she has put me in line. So yeah, that's been my experience.
Yeah, I think I retired my practice with Santa Muerte, and all of my objects, all my precious objects and statues and everything else got put into a box, and I still hold it to this day, promising that I'll give it to someone I encounter that I think will treat it with deference. It's actually in my I carry it with me. It's one of the few, I traveled a lot over the last few years, and it's always come with me with that promise. I retired my practice because I felt like I was at a stage of I came into her cult because I was in a certain stage of life. She takes care of the downtrodden. She takes care of those on the fringe, whether criminal, whether queer, whether impoverished in some way, drug addiction. She comes to those who are experiencing as a dramatic outcast. And as I started to come out of that experience with her help, the relationship certainly changed, both me and her. And I realized, out of respect for her, I said, I am asking permission if I can suspend this relationship. And she took it in the way that she might. My bracelet that I used to wear every day suddenly fell off that day. I decided to do a final culto. I burned every single candle, every single incense, every single offering. I spent like $50 to $100 on pan dulces and candies and whiskey and at her altar, and every candle lit. In the middle of the night, I woke up. I don't talk about this much because it's actually uncomfortable, but now I'm willing to talk about it because I think it shows the truth to the practice. I was woken up by a woman, maybe sounded, if I were to judge the voice, a woman in her 30s, maybe, so somewhat youthful, but stern, with a slight accent. And just as if you are talking to me here, I woken up, a woman's voice said, "You will suffer and die." She said, "You will suffer and die." And that was the end of the practice. Then I boxed it all up, and first I was and I called out. I said, "What? Please say more to me." And there was silence. It was just me speaking to my candles. And I thought about it a lot over the years, and I still don't have a definite answer. I just feel like the nature of Santa Muerte, it wasn't, the way she said you will suffer and die wasn't like someone angry at you. Also, it was said in almost a strange motherly way, but a stern mother. You will suffer and die, Doesn't make it too much better. But after that, I've thought about it, and I've thought about it in all the ways I can think about it, and I simply thought that in the end, what I've come to is that she represents a particular spirit of life. And I think those words are the only words Santa Muerte could possibly say in a situation like that. You're not going to exactly part ways, or you're not going to have a change of relationship in a casual or easy way. So I now am not so frightened by that. I was terrified by it when I heard it, obviously. But now I respect it, and I understand Santa Muerte couldn't have said anything else. It's actually perfect that that's the approach. It makes sense. So, and it's made me have a heightened respect. So, I'm not gonna lose that box, right? I gotta keep that box protected. In the meantime, but yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about that. So, I think like this is just an interpretation on my end, but especially because in the way that she said it in a kind of stern motherly way was,
Sure.
It was a case of like, okay, so you wanting to suspend this practice with her, this relationship, and her saying you will suffer and die is like a case of like, well, you're going to return to me anyway because you'll suffer and die. Like,
oh, of course, yeah. That's that's a total yeah. No, 100%. That's the way that I've kind of come close to it, and that's how people around me that I've kind of discussed the story with have kind of have kind of opinioned on it, and that is that, well, everyone goes back to Santa Muerte in the end. right?
Mm.
So you will suffer and die. So you will return to me. You will come back. So and that's the way I've kind of settled to think of it. But she originally came to me in my dreams. I think when we're talking about Santa Muerte, there's a question of what place does ethnic and ethnocultural play into it. Santa Muerte, obviously a saint that probably influenced by Aztec, came into as an unofficial Mexican saint a Catholic saint in the um, early 20th century, and then quickly grew in popularity. What is it? There was also a question of how do I, being of a separate ethnicity, but growing up in LA, being in Latino culture, at least peripherally, for a lot of my life, what grounds does that give me to understand Santa Muerte within a Mexican Roman Catholic context? And I think in the region, I think the fact that she came to me in dreams, I knew of her for years. I kept a candle of her even though I wasn't practicing with her and I wasn't giving devotion, but I kept a candle of her because I respected her so much. For probably 5, 6, or 7 years before it became obvious and she appeared to me in dreams. I went to there's a couple of churches in LA devoted to Santa Muerte. And I told them my story. I said, is it okay? Or I said, she reached out to me in a dream. She said, one priest told me, if she reached out to you in a dream and you've been chosen, that's actually the initiating factor. It's not that we're left-hand path. We also don't need license, right? I also don't necessarily need my card stamped that it's okay for me to do a particular thing. But it's important to be aware of the cultural influences and the ethnic influences behind it. And also one thing that's interesting is that as I've gotten older, I've looked to how can I gravitate more towards my ancestral, what powers in that ancestral practice. And so the demons to me are one way that I connect with my ancestors, in the sense that the demons, the Goetia is very European. So it's being a Satanist, and especially a demonolator or dealing with demonolatry, although these are syncretic images, they're also if you think of something that's of European or origin in a way, that's a part of the culture. That's a part of that. So as I get older, I also started to think of what things are closer to my ancestors and things like that. And I don't think that's necessary for everyone. I think Vodou is absolutely powerful. I think Santeria is powerful. I think Kimbanda is powerful. And I think we all have the power to choose and find license in these practices, regardless of where you come from. And those practitioners will tell you that. It's like Humberto Maggi and his wife, Veronica Rivas, told me. I said, what about with Kimbanda? Being of European descent and working with Kimbanda, what do you think of that? And he said, well, there's Baphomets. We have Baphomets. We have demonic images, which are European. You have just as much access to the practice as we do, which is a fair answer. And when you ask them, that's what most people say. There are some people that I think are bad faith will say that, no, because of your race, you're not allowed into this practice. But I think for the most part, this is a personal journey. I think if you pay mind to that culture and you try to understand the context of the spirit where it was housed in, I think it's perfectly fine if you pay deference and respect to that culture and to that spirit. So there's the question of the closed system, right?
I would say in the comment dealing with like ethnic background and things like that, I think that's more of like a first world issue than anything else. Like, as someone that lives here in Mexico, and I've lived here for 15 years. So in the city that I live in, it has one of the largest, I mean, I realized this recently, but it has one of the largest kind of, I guess you could call kind of like churches to La Santísima Muerte here. Indeed. And there's also a place called the Cuatro Esquinas, which is 3 shops for Santeria and a poultry shop. You do the math. So, and when you go to the Four Corners, See, I've never worked with Santa Muerte, and there's a reason I haven't worked with Santa Muerte, because when I went to these shops, each one of them gave the same warning. No te metes si no te vas a pagar, porque así a ti sí te va a cobrar. And that translates over as, don't start this unless you're willing to pay for it, because she will charge you.
Yeah.
And so with that, I was like, all right, homie, I'm good. Like,
No. And that's the reason why I didn't immediately jump into the practice, because I took her very seriously. And I thought, once you pray to her, once you engage in cults with her, you're married to that. This is a marriage, and you're not going to get out of that easily. And I always paid fearsome deference to Santa Muerte, and that's a thing that I think it's lost. Is I made a somewhat joke recently on a podcast in the last few months, where I said I'm a Satan-fearing man, and that is to say that I believe the divine is terrifying, and a lot of spirits should be a terrifying presence, even if you think of fairies, even if you think of Diana, or you think of Persephone. An epiphany, that is to say, the original term for epiphany is to mean the manifestation of a deity, is an overwhelming experience. The presence of a spirit is fucking terrifying. And that may not be everyone's practice, that may be not everyone's experience, but it is mine. And actually, I think you said something. You said recently, I think this might offend people, but I'm tired of people treating spirits like Pokemon. It's one of the clips I saw coming into this interview. And that's the thing. That's what I've been saying with people. They do treat the diamonds and the spirits like Pokemon. They do treat them like it's so pedestrian. It's so like, oh yeah, well, I did a sigil for this spirit and it was cool and it was fine, but it didn't do what I wanted. What? There's no sense of ultimacy. There's no sense of the sacred. Right. We should take a lesson. One time we should take a lesson from the fundamentalists is those crying at the altar. If you look at that Bible Camp documentary where they're crying, talking about Jesus Christ, I think we can take a couple of lessons from this, and understanding that approaching the divine should be one that's ultimate respect and some divinity, and not like trading cards, like magic cards that we're like playing in a game. And I fear that in the age of internet culture, that is what happens. That the spirits end up becoming these fun artifacts, and I think there's respect to be paid there, ultimately.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing that's missing, isn't it? Is the respect for what you're trying to get yourself into. We've kind of covered that, right? It's this idea of this thing is going to do what I want it to do because I'm asking it to do it. If I light the correct color candle and I burn the right incense and I use the right oil and I throw down the right herbs and I ask it enough times, it's like, wait, yes, sometimes you're going to get what you want. Sometimes you're going to get what you're asking for. But then what about what it wants? Like, so the thing is like, so there's an exchange, right? And in Dyron, I've actually talked about this at depth. There's an exchange that happens when you do this type of work. And it's very much transactional. But what kind of irritates me is like when people sit there, it's like, oh yeah, like I think somebody said, like, I saw somebody say like Belial likes coffee. And I'm like, do you honestly think, do you really, really believe that this being that you are contacting to do this great deed for you with their power and ability gives a fuck what you're putting on your altar? Like, let's be completely honest with ourselves. Do you really think they give a shit? Do you really think they care that there's a glass of wine? Do you really think that they care that there's... No, they don't. The transaction that's happening, we don't know what we're giving. We're not aware of what we're getting. They're getting from us. They're definitely getting from us. They're definitely getting something, but we don't know what that is.
Yeah. I agree with you in part, and then I disagree with you as well. I think I agree with you in that we cannot understand, we cannot speculate on the mind of one of these spirits. We can't speculate on the ontology. We don't know how they exist, where they exist, and in what way they exist. And anyone who tries to come and kind of tell you exactly demons exist because they're on a vibratory pattern that's this far below the, it's just really to be so certain about their nature. So I agree in that we can understand exactly what they want, or if they even necessarily want the same way that we do. I don't know. However, they seem to give messages that are pretty clear, asking for weird things and interesting things. I remember reading Urban Voodoo by, I think, Christopher Hyatt. And in it, he talks about how a spirit told him that he needed a particular McDonald's toy from 1976 or something. So he had to hunt down this pre-internet age. He had to hunt down this toy because this is the particular thing it was requesting. I think cigars, whiskey, coffee beans. I think there's a few hundred, even thousands of years of precedent to this, and I think there's some truth in that tradition. So I think the spirits might ask for things. I've had spirits ask for actions. I want you to conduct yourself in a particular way. I want you to go to a particular place that I'm telling you to go to. I want you to talk to this particular person or do this particular thing. So if we start to expand it to think of, they might actually want events or conditions or states of mind or ways to interact with the world or events to unfold that they actually want as a sacrifice. But sometimes they might just want coffee beans. But so it's yeah.
I mean, look, to each their own, right? Like, so anyway, so normally this is only a 1 hour show where we're coming up on 2 hours here.
Oh wow, nice. Cool, very cool.
No, it's been a great conversation, man. Like honestly, like I loved having you on.
Ira, I mean, it's been she's the one that's really held out late into the hours, so
yeah, because it's like fucking
2 or something,
almost 3 o'clock in the morning for her.
Yeah. So thank you for your...
So, but I do appreciate you coming on. I'll definitely be having you come on again if you're up for it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, of course.
So great conversation.
Yeah, it's been a fun conversation. I liked meeting all of you, and I think you've had incredibly insightful questions that shows a kind of robust understanding of the path. And I think we've been able to kind of engage in a rare conversation about some of the ideas that I'm most interested in that I think don't get covered in these conversations. So.
Well, yeah, I will definitely be the first person to admit that I am more theoretical in my practice than I am like on a scholarly level. Like, I'm not going to be able to tell you authors and things like that, but I've read more than enough of my fair share of shit.
That's okay.
You know?
Sure.
So,
sure.
But, yeah. So again, November 7th and the website again where people can sign up for that?
Is serpenthall.com.
All right. Excellent. So you guys, somebody asked if they could do it from their phone. Like, I forgot about somebody asked if they could do it.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think they can. I think they could do the class from the phone. They could stream video there on the site. The site has a mobile version, so.
All right, awesome.
I think they'll be just fine.
All right. So, anyone else have any final thoughts? Dyra, here, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think this has been a really cool conversation, and yeah, thanks for coming on.
Mystic.
Thank you, Dyra. Thank you, Salon. Yeah, Mystic. Is it Salon?
Yeah, it's Mystic Salon.
Yeah.
I've just been happy away at chat. No, I've actually take a lot of notes and have some things to kind of look back on. So,
do we have? I mean, it's up to you. But do we have anything in chat asking for a response, or that would be interesting to kind of cover?
Somebody's asking what your socials are.
Oh yeah, sure. Just Shea Bile, SHEA BILE on Instagram, X, TikTok, YouTube. Just Shea Bile, SHEA BILE. Deferredgnosis.com is my podcast. I'm often more on other people's podcasts than I post my own podcasts, but it's still a good hub. And shaybelay at Gmail if you want to reach out me by email, because ultimately we can't trust any of these platforms. Yeah, I was taken off Facebook earlier in this year, and they didn't really give me a reason, and they rejected all appeals, and so that's why I've decided to kind of diversify. And add me on here, add me on Discord. I haven't really been active on Discord, but I should more. So
Yeah, Discord is definitely a good hub.
yeah. So and I think it's important for us that we don't know what rules they have to their algorithm. I'm very happy that you're able to find me via the TikTok algorithm, but it's, we can't trust these organizations that are profit driven and that might and are almost certainly have things in place to prevent occult related material from being from gaining any signal. And so yeah, let's diversify our platforms. Let's not rely on one, and because we can't trust these people to allow us to have a community. It's very obvious that things like Satanism and the left-hand path and the occult aren't advertiser friendly for them. It's not Disney friendly, and we have to do what we can to keep our community together in these different formats. So
Agreed.
I always push us that direction.
Definitely. Agreed. All right. Well, Shay, we will definitely be in contact for a future episode.
All right, brother. Also, thank you, everyone. And it's been a wonderful night. Thank you so much. Avas Satanas.
And as always, everybody, kill thy fucking self. See you in the fucking next one. Fuck out.